me. And as Divine said, I'm presenting about the ADAPT study today, and that's an NIHR funded study that we've just been doing for the last year. So the ADAPT team is myself. So it was me and Professor Anne Forster that co-led this study. So I was a CI. And then we have a co-applicant team. So we've got Dr. Cara Gray-Burrows, that's based at the University of Leeds, Rosie Shannon, that's one of our colleagues here at the Academic Unit of Ageing and Stroke. Jeff Render is the person who'd had the stroke that joined the co-applicant team. He's been amazing. And Dr. Jen Early, so she used to work with us here at the Academic Unit of Ageing and Stroke, but she's physically in Durham now because she took on a new role, but she was very much engaged with this project. So that's just to give you a flavour of the team. And we also had a researcher, Sarah Gibson, who did a lot of the work that we must acknowledge as well. So thanks to Sarah for the work that she's done on the project. So the focus of today's presentation is how we've used creative co-production to not only generate the findings that we've got, but also to disseminate those in a creative way. So we did a lot of work with stroke survivors, carers, and NHS professionals. So I'll talk through the types of things that we've done, and hopefully it'll be helpful for people who might want to do something similar. So I'll also reflect on the process and yeah, provide some practical considerations when doing this sort of creative work. So the aim of the ADAPT project was to work together to give ideas on how to change an existing support program that we had called Get Set Go, and how we could help different people to stand and move more throughout the day after a stroke. So I've underlined throughout the day there because often when we were talking about this, people were thinking in terms of physical activity and doing quite a lot of like a big bout of movement, but sometimes we're just, the more important thing that we're focusing on in ADAPT is just getting those smaller movements throughout the day, even if it's not really classed as physical activity. It could just be standing up briefly or making a cup of tea or something like that. So that's the message that we wanted to get across, so how we can encourage different people to stand and move. So in terms of why we've done the ADAPT project, this is a project that we applied for funding for on the back of Recreate. So Recreate was a 7-year NIHR funded program grant that focused on developing and evaluating an intervention aimed at reducing sedentary behaviour after stroke. So that started back in 2017. I'd actually worked on that all those years, and I led the process evaluation work in that project. So it was there that the rationale for that work was that there are health benefits to reducing the time that people after stroke spend sitting. And the benefits are things like reducing blood pressure, it can help mood, it can help people socially and physically in terms of just enabling their bodies to move and support their rehab that they get support with from professionals within the stroke services. So we know that it's important to be able to support people in that. But when we did the Recreate programme, we did a lot of interviews and observations as part of the process evaluation within a lot of stroke services. And we're aware that some people liked using the intervention that we created, which was encouraging people to stand and move more. And some people were not so interested in using that. So we needed to do something that would be more appropriate for different types of people, because even the staff said that some people really loved using the intervention. So this was an intervention where they were given a traffic light status about how much they should be standing and moving. That was in the inpatient stroke service setting. And then they would be assessed by a physiotherapist and given a prescription about how much they should stand and move through the day. And then from there, the ones that were able to move with the assistance of one other person or a walking aid or independently would be given a guide where they were encouraged to tick off when they'd be standing and moving. And some people absolutely loved this and really enjoyed ticking things off, and other people just didn't want to engage with something like that, which is understandable after stroke because people have a lot of different impacts of stroke. So we just found that staff were saying there's a particular type of person that this seems to support, this Get Set Go intervention, and even patients themselves talked in a way where they talked about the type of person they were. So this allowed us to recognise that there are different types of people after stroke. So from a lot of the work we do acknowledge that things do need tailoring, but the findings of the process evaluation in Recreate really did highlight that we would benefit from looking at different types of people in terms of how they go about standing and moving and what motivates them to stand and move, and some of the challenges to that, depending on whether they're physical or communication problems or all the varied impacts that stroke can have. We were very aware that we could benefit from looking at different types of people after stroke and how we could adapt the current intervention called Get Set Go. So in terms of how we've done the ADAPT project, we got together with stroke survivors and carers in a series of groups in workshops. So this is an example of one of the images from one of the groups. So we worked through the process of identifying the types after stroke, which I'll come on to. And then we held these co-production groups. So we did 4 of these in person with stroke survivors and their carers, with staff from our research team supporting the delivery of this. And we also did some online workshops for staff within Bradford and Leeds stroke services, but they were online just because of the logistics of staff had limited time to come out from their practice. So we did those online, but ideally we'd obviously love to have people there in person, but it still worked. So in terms of just touching on this approach that we use, just to give some context, I'm mainly talking about the creativity today, but just so you know what we did. So we basically used an ideal type approach to establish what these types should be. And then we were working towards the output of this project, which was to produce some recommendations for each type after stroke. So an ideal type approach is a qualitative method. So it was initially introduced by Weber and Gerhardt, and then it was more recently adapted by Stapley in 2021. So this is a process that we can use as qualitative researchers when we want to establish these types. So it's a little bit different from, for example, we use thematic analysis in the process evaluation. So it's a different method from that. So this was a secondary analysis of data that we already had from the Recreate process evaluation. So we did some interviews with staff in the stroke services about using Get Set Go, and we also did some interviews with patients about their experiences of using Get Set Go. And it's the patient interviews that we've specifically focused on in this ADAPT study. So we wanted to keep it a bit more focused because we were mindful it was a year of funding and we wanted to make sure we did it in a good quality way, but we are aware that it would potentially be good to look at different types of staff at a different point. So in terms of ideal types, we mean groupings of similar cases that we construct to illustrate patterns, behaviours, thoughts, or feelings. So with this process, it is 7 steps and we work through those steps. So initially, as with any qualitative type of analysis approach, we just allow ourselves to become familiarised with the data. And we had the advantage of the fact that myself and Rosie had already collected the data in Recreate, so we were very familiar with it and we'd analysed the data. And Sarah, who was involved, also worked on Recreate in the last couple of years, so she was aware of that data as well. And then we created these case constructions. So we took each participant interview, so we had 27 patient interviews, and we wrote a little summary for each one. So it was about a page of A4. And in that, we were focused on how they talk about standing and moving and like their behaviours around it, their feelings towards that, what motivated them, some of like the context. So like how the stroke had impacted them, because that will give us a flavour of the types of things that might be challenging for them. We included in those summaries things about support networks and things about how people talk. Like people might say, I'm determined, so I'm the type of person who blah, blah, blah. And then they might compare themselves to another person. And that's the type of thing we noted down. So we were looking at something different from when we were looking at the interviews in the Recreate programme, where we were looking more at the factors that influence whether people engaged with the intervention or whether staff were able to implement it. It had a different focus here. So we constructed those summaries. So that was 27 summaries altogether. And then we were tasked with trying to reduce all those 27 summaries into types. So myself, Rosie and Sarah got together in person and we printed out all the summaries to be able to construct these ideal types. And we had them all scattered about everywhere. And we were just grouping them into types. So I can come on to that shortly. And then we also identified optimal cases. So this is a key part of the process where you identify the person or the type in that group that most represents that type. So if, for example, you had like a determined type, it would be a particular person who represents that type in terms of how they talk about being determined. So that's the one that stands out the most that you sort of use as the marker of what that type actually is. And then we formed ideal type descriptions. So the idea is that you identify the type. So we go through a bit of a cyclical iterative process, and then we can have descriptions of the types and checking credibility. So we did this through discussions with some experts in ideal types based at the University of Leeds. And then, as with any other qualitative approach, you make comparisons as you go through and refine the types. So those 7 steps go from the start where you become familiar and you end up with these types and descriptions of types that you've thoroughly checked throughout the process with the team and, like I say, with someone external to the team. So as I mentioned, we did, so it was co-production work. So we did workshops between November and June this year. So November last year through to June this year. The whole project was a year in total from August to August. And we worked with the stroke survivors and carers in person. Like I say, the staff from Bradford and Leeds we worked with online, and we also did a little bit of outreach work. So the picture on the right is myself and Rosie and our other colleague Jill at a local stroke group called Creative in Bradford. So that's down at the mill. So we went out to other stroke groups as well to meet and engage with stroke survivors that didn't take part in the co-production groups. So we had 13 attendees in the co-production groups, and they were really well attended actually throughout. And we had 9 staff that attended on Teams as well. And then we went to different stroke groups. So we've got connections with say aphasia in Skipton, Ilkley Stroke Group, Roundhay Stroke Group, Creative in Bradford, Shipley Stroke Group. So we've got good contacts and links with all of those and different strokes in Leeds as well. So this is just another image of people at the group. So we always made sure it was quite engaging. I'll come on to why we've got some Quality Street knocking around there. People were split up onto tables like that just so they could engage with things. And I started the sessions just going through a simple slide set like you can see there, but the rest of the sessions were just about engaging in little tasks that we'd planned in advance. So that's another image of where we took along some of the Get Set Go materials and had some case study tasks with people as well. So that's just to show people engaging and all the colourful work that we had as well. So one of the other things that we've done as part of this project is to involve, this is Mark Chappell. So he was co-leading the Skipton Say Aphasia group with his wife, Caroline. They're actually moving to a different part of the country. So they're no longer leading that group, but that's how I got to know them. So when I went to visit the group initially to make these links and recruit people for this project, I met Mark. He had a lot of his artwork just around the tables at Say Aphasia. This is a group for people with communication difficulties after stroke. It's a really lovely group. So he had a lot of his artwork just spread around, and I actually thought to myself, it'd be a really good idea if he could be part of the project and actually do the work in terms of the artwork, because he was keen to take part in the project, but often we've used artists that are from elsewhere, and I just thought that's a lovely opportunity for someone who's had a stroke to actually get involved in the artwork, and he was so up for that. You'll see some of his art as I continue with this presentation, but that's just an image that is created of himself, and some of the images that he also created as part of this ADAPT project as well. So if we have a look now at what we have created from this whole project, so as I said, it was a year altogether. So we did that ideal type process initially. So some of it was sort of behind the scenes happening in the office, but we focused on particular steps of that. So the main steps that we were focusing on with the co-production groups were establishing the types and describing those types as well. And then the later co-production groups where we looked at how we can refine Get Set Go, and the recommendations were something we wanted to do as part of the project, but they're not necessarily steps in the ideal type process. So they were just continuing after. So we established these different types. So initially, when we worked through the types and grouped all those 27 different summaries, we actually sat together and felt quite overwhelmed. There was a lot of paper everywhere, and we had about 13 types initially. But then we were thinking we need to sort of get this across in a way to the group where it's something they can digest, it's something they can work with, and it makes sense to them, because it is quite an abstract process, quite a complex way of working this ideal types. It's not something everyone's familiar with. So we reduced the types to 6 types initially that we took to the workshops. And we wanted a bit of an innovative way of talking about these types. So we discussed all sorts of ideas, including animals and cats. And then I just said, what about sweets? So we ended up with quality streets. So we've got, when we first went, we had these 4 types that you'll see here, plus a couple of others that were more focused on communication and memory, and another one about carers. So basically we took along the types. There were just the pictures of the quality streets, the names of the types, a little description, and we asked them what they thought about these types as one of the first things that they did once they'd done a few icebreaker tasks. And they really loved the quality street idea. It was something to sort of create a bit of humour and get them talking, and then I took along some quality street to the groups every time, so it became a bit of an ongoing joke. But people started talking in terms of people being like the fudge or the toffee penny, for example. So after the first group, we got the feedback input from them, and they said that it was apparent that people could be more than one type at a time. So we knew that we had to be a little bit flexible with how we worked with these types. We knew that we established that, for example, communication is important, but it might not be a type in of itself. It's more something to consider across different types. And the same with emotional impacts after stroke. It can be that people will face those things irrespective of their type. So it was things like that that were coming out. The staff actually said that we needed a new type, which was a toffee penny. So that's people that were quite passive. So that type came totally from the staff. But then when we took that to the stroke survivors and carers, they were very much in agreement with the idea of that type as well. So these are the 4 types that we reduce things down to after those couple of groups. So we've got a determined type. So by this, we mean those that are actively engaged, quite resourceful, and they seek opportunities. And then we've got people who are passive. So we thought about these people as disinterested, disengaged. We were aware just from discussions we were having that passive could be considered a little bit offensive potentially, depending on how it was worded. So we'd have to be careful about how that was communicated to people, but both the staff and the patients and also carers, they were very aware of people who were this type, or they might have known themselves to be more like this at some point in their recovery after stroke. And then we had a fearful type. So these were the ones that were quite hesitant and fearful and reluctant really to move. So it might be that the fears were actually stopping them from doing as much movement as they might have done, even if they were physically able. And then finally, other life priorities. So these were people who were quite overwhelmed and consumed by other things in life. So for example, some of the people we interviewed were already caring for a partner before they had their stroke. So they were still under pressure to do that role, even though they're the ones who'd had the stroke. So they were kind of wanting to rush out of hospital to get back to doing what they always did, or it might be people with children. So we were aware that these type of people were actually moving quite a lot, but they might just be busy doing other things and almost not realizing that or not documenting that. Then we've got the visual representations of our types. So once we'd established those types in the second group, Mark did these drawings, and these were brought to the third group so that people could use these as a way of sort of connecting with what we'd done so far. So he used the quality streets as part of creating these types. So you'll see there, like the green one, for example, that's the person with the other life priorities. So the to-do list was a way of showing like how some people have a lot going on. The person's trying to like drag the child somewhere while there's washing spinning around, they're going to the doctors, someone's trying to call them. And even that to-do list was useful when we were doing the task, because people were talking about how people might prioritize what's going on, and it just sparked a bit of thinking. And Mark even said that he drew the triangle, as the triangle for that one works because it just shows a bit more chaosness, like things pointing at different angles. So it's just interesting to hear from his perspective, like when he was doing his art. And then the fearful one, it just shows like the idea of hazards, and it's quite a striking image of someone looking scared there. And then this one was quite a popular one when we showed it to everyone, because of the dog and like the scenes in the background. So like it just gets people thinking a bit more and can imagine those situations. And then of course we've got the determined one in that image there, showing that every little helps. So slightly based on Tesco there as well. But yeah, he created these images so that we could use them as a basis for discussion about how we would support these different types. So that was really useful in the third workshops. And just to say, we always repeated what we did with the stroke survivors with this and carers with the staff as well. So this was really engaging for working online with them on Teams. So it was really good. And then once we'd asked people what we thought each type needed in those third workshops, Mark created these images that were used for each type. So he's actually, I don't know if you can see them well there, but basically he's put the words of things that each type might need within the faces, just to be quite powerful. So like when it was other life priorities, the people who were spinning lots of plates, it was important, like I said, to prioritize. They needed some fatigue management at times, the importance of other people coming in to help, so like the carer support, because sometimes these people were just taking on too much, and it might be that others could actually help if they were aware of this. So that idea of asking for help was important. And we were aware as well with this type that they might actually be moving a lot already, but they just don't want to document things. So it's about finding a way to support them to see that they're doing quite well in the movement, but we just want them to move well and be aware that actually they might need a rest at times. And then with the fearful types, we could see the difference. It was really helpful to know that like we could start to establish the difference between the types and what they would need. So the fearful types, it was about encouraging them, providing some reassurance, allowing them to sort of have that time, like staff might have to spend a little bit more time with the people who are fearful, understand what they're actually fearful about, because it could be that staff might make assumptions and then you're not really focusing on what's bothering them. So that was really helpful to think of the ones that were more fearful in those ways. And then the determined type, there's this bold words here about quality over quantity. So we established from talking with the stroke survivors and carers, and also from the staff perspective, that some of the people who were determined were probably moving a lot, but not necessarily in a good quality way. So in terms of maintaining good movement that wouldn't injure them or cause any problems from like a therapy perspective, it was important for those people to just sort of, staff were saying they almost might need reining in a little bit. So it's finding that balance really. But often it was the case that people who were determined were up for sort of recording movements, they were very up for moving. So it's just about finding ways to encourage what they're already doing in many cases and making sure that that's safe really. And then the passive type, again, it was similar-ish to the fearful in the fact that it was often about staff having more of a conversation about like why, what's stopping you from moving, and also like something a bit inspiring. So making sure that what they were suggesting was aligned with interest, because often like people might have just lost a bit of that motivation in an understandable way following stroke, because it can leave people feeling like that. There's a lot going on. Obviously, emotional aspects of stroke are important as well. And so basically it was about working with these more passive people to truly understand what's going on and not just assuming that they're not interested at all. So that was really important to have those conversations. So we could see from those discussions that there were differences in the types, and we were starting to establish the recommendations, and it was really powerful to have it in this art form as well. So after that group, before the final one, Mark created these key messages for each type. So these were more images. So we've got the determined, and it's this idea of someone like blooming from being in a cocoon and sort of coming out of themselves. And then the one with the passive person is showed it as someone sort of being pushed out of their chair, as like a metaphor for being encouraged to just get going. And the snails were to resemble, like, it doesn't matter if we move at a snail's pace, it's all about doing something. And then this fearful one is quite a sinister image in some ways, but it was to represent that people can often feel like a ghost of their former selves. But then he wanted the hands on the shoulders to show that people were there to support them. And the people in the background there are just they're resembling support for the person, to know that they're not alone. And obviously the rainbow is a positive image as well. And then the one for the green, so this is the other life priorities. It's just about breaking down those tasks to something that's a bit more manageable, because they've got all those tasks surrounding them. And then this little person's come along to be like, remember SMART goals. So they want it to be something attainable, given that they're already juggling a hell of a lot, and they've got the impacts of stroke to contend with as well. So they were, again, powerful images created by Mark. And it was great to have, we did actually have some little printouts of, I'll come on to it, but for the exhibition, we had little descriptions of all these based on Mark's words. And it's really lovely to hear from his perspective as the artist in terms of what he was thinking when he did these. So during the project, Mark said, why don't we do an exhibition? And this vision became a reality. So we ran with it, and so we made it a reality at Mind the Gap Studio. So this is just at Lister Mill down the road from BIHR, for those who know the area. So this was something that we did a couple of months ago now. It was in August time. So I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we did along the way, just if anyone else is thinking about doing something similar, because it was amazing. But obviously it doesn't come without its efforts that we had to put into this, but it's been incredible. So it was an exhibition that we did for 2 weeks in August. The space was open 4 hours a day for the 2 weeks, but just not over the weekend. So some of the things we practically had to consider in case it's useful for anybody else. So we, of course, had to establish the venue. So when we were thinking about stroke survivors, it was somewhere that needed to be accessible. We knew that it would appeal to the wider public and other people as well, but that was obviously important. And the dates, of course, and the times and the costings. So we did consider a few different venues, but when we found Mind the Gap, we were really pleased, because the team down there are brilliant. They're really supportive of like the planning and what we needed to be doing, and just actually putting up the exhibition on the day. It made a huge difference to have a team like that at Mind the Gap that was so supportive. We, of course, had to decide on our vision. So Mark was brilliant at that. You could see his brain just lighting up at the thought of all this. I had meetings with Mark and his wife, Caroline, with just those two. So I met them quite a few times in person, because, again, it was important to be able to plan this together. It wasn't just a case of me doing it and saying, do you want to come along to the launch? So it was very much co-created. It was sort of like one of those things where you realize it's a skill in itself to actually co-create something like this with someone who's had a stroke and support their needs. And Caroline was amazing, as well as Mark's wife. And the team were brilliant. So I did meet with Caroline and Mark separately at times. And then we did have a few meetings down at Mind the Gap. They were brilliant. They were really excited about Mark's work, which was great. So we had to create like a written plan for the space, how the work will be displayed, the sizing of the artwork, figured out interactive parts, because Mark had actually done some smaller exhibitions in the past. So we had a lot of this adapt work that you've seen, but we also had some of Mark's work that he's exhibited before, but we thought, well, why not? It's all good messages around stroke that are raising awareness. So he had some interactive sort of augmented reality stuff, which was great. So yeah, he had all this vision, but between us, we had to get this in a place that the Mind the Gap team could use. So we worked together to do that. We planned for the artwork and t-shirts to be printed. So we got the arts done at Leeds University. I ended up getting a t-shirt for Mark and he got one for me. So great minds think alike. So we had matching t-shirts, ordered catering, all the standard stuff like that. Obviously we had to have Quality Street there. All the invites to the launch event, we had little touches on the day like non-alcoholic Prosecco that just added a bit of excitement. People were doing little cheers. It was lovely. Raised awareness and worked with the comms team at BIHR. So Dasha and Shahima and Nicola Drake have been amazing. Dasha came and filmed the event to publicise that as well. And Mark created some videos. So he's really talented in terms of like the engagement stuff as well. So he created some videos for people to watch at the exhibition. And he did some little, he asked me to get filmed by Dasha to promote it. And it was like being directed for the whole thing. So it was brilliant. And you could tell how much passion had gone into it from him. And he shares a lot on, say, aphasia, Skipton Facebook, the Adapt Facebook that we've got, and Ilkley Stroke Group, because he's connected with that. So there was a lot of, he was counting the hits. Some days it was something like 1.1 thousand or something. I was like, he thought everything was going viral. So it was really exciting for him. And then we had the evaluation. So we did have some feedback forms and we've had some great feedback. And then post-event, there's still a few things I need to tie up because the report was due mid-September. So we got that finalised. And yeah, all of a sudden we're in October, but still tying bits up in terms of just sending out some last summaries and thank yous and yeah, getting this out there. And of course the paper as well. So I just want to highlight with anything like this, it was so important to have Mark be in the heart of this art exhibition. So the picture on the left is Mark with his wife and then MJ, who works at Mind the Gap, on the right. So that was just us going through all the augmented reality stuff, making sure that it was all stuff that we could do on the day. So the team were aware of it. And then that's a picture of us with, so myself, Mark and MJ as well, outside the studio where we were doing the exhibition. But he really was at the heart of planning this and coming together to do it. Yeah, it was all a brilliant vision. So it was great to have that. So we could also learn in terms of people can have, so basically if you've got an idea of how we spread the word, it's something you can take forward in your own sort of project. So we shared this on different channels, so like X, Blue Sky, the ARC channels, of course. We've got Facebook, the Adapt Facebook page. We had this poster that Mark actually created, so we stuck that all around the building here, shared that on a lot of social channels. I physically went and gave some of these out at the hospital as well. So yeah, it was quite a striking poster that he created, and that was shared across different web channels as well. So it was really great to do that, and it was good how much conversation this whole project's attracted as well. Like people, it feels like it sparked discussions or opportunities that might not have been there had we not done it. So of course there's like the ARC team, the knowledge mobilisation team with Kate and Divine and everybody. There's the All Things Stroke website is a website that has been produced that I was involved in, and it's the West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership team across West Yorkshire and Harrogate that have produced that, but they publicise this on their website, which is great. The Stroke Association, someone from Halifax got in touch and they donated some flyers and things for the day. We've got the links with Say Aphasia, as I've mentioned, but also there's a lady called Emma Rich who got in touch that works across, she like coordinates all the Say Aphasia groups. So I joined an online meeting actually and presented to people from across different areas of the country. She's been really supportive of the work. I went to Helsinki this year for the European Stroke Congress, and we had a poster there. I've presented at Reimagine Ageing, which is part of the University of Leeds. I'm forced to lead that with some colleagues at Leeds. I presented at Lucid, so that's the Leeds Unit for Complex Intervention Development Group, so they were interested. I've got links with Bradford City of Culture, so I'm actually part of a steering group for Bradford City of Culture, so a creative steering group. So it's been great to link with them. They were keen to publicise this everywhere. And then we got in the newsletter for the Yorkshire Policy Innovation Partnership. So it's just been a great opportunity for people who've wanted to share this work and like they've noticed it. And yeah, it's been great in that way. It's just opened up conversations and yeah, it's just been a bit eye-opening in terms of what's possible, really. So it's been great. And these are just some snippets. Obviously, you can't read them properly, but this just shows where it's ended up. So it's been in the Let's Talk magazine at Bradford here. It went on the like intranet page, Bradford Institute of Health Research. The one on the right there is the All Things Stroke website that I mentioned. It was in the Telegraph and Argus as well. So that's really good. So the launch day was the 11th of August. So we had a day where we just invited some of the people who've been part of this. Not everyone could come, but people did drop in and out as well throughout the day. And then it was open to the public after that until the 22nd of August. So we just got images there of the little fizz and the Quality Street. And you can see there, I know it's difficult to see it all, but you can see the artwork hung, and to have those images in such huge designs like that was quite striking when you walked into the room. And then it all continued round the room, so you can just see half the room there, but it was all there. And then we had these interactive elements that I've touched on. So that's Rosie on the left, one of our colleagues on the grant. She was listening to the video that Mark had created about an intro to the Climb Back exhibition, and the augmented reality is me there. So it's, you just hold your phone in front of it and it sort of came to life and started dancing, and there's voiceovers on there, and Mark and his wife have done that, and some of the people they know have become the voices of those. So that was very much about promoting messages around aphasia as well, and the communication challenges that people face after stroke. So as I've mentioned, it got some media interest. So we were in the Telegraph and Argus, and Mark had an interview on Greatest Hits Radio as well. So just to reflect on the workshops, it has been a really novel addition to the project to have one of the stroke survivors actually doing the artwork, because like I said, we've had artists before, but we've never done it like this. The creativity that we used was really helpful for communicating some of these ideas, because the ideal type approach is quite complicated. And we did have half of the group that were that had aphasia after stroke, so it was important for sort of supporting that communication. We had some good quality conversations, excuse the pun, and the groups were really well attended. We were really pleased. And it helped with the staff. Like I'd mentioned, it went down really well on Teams to be able to do something quite creative. And they were really memorable, these types. And everyone always says, oh, is that the Quality Street project? So it's something that's been memorable for people to be aware of. So yeah, we were able to work through some of the key parts of ideal types and keeping some of the more complex stuff like behind the scenes. And I think that's always a bit of a balance with this type of stuff. Like even when I did my PhD years ago with intervention mapping, that was a complex process, and I found ways to sort of interact and deliver the key parts of that process with a group. But it's yeah, it's something that we felt went quite well with this group. So we worked flexibly to support Mark's needs when planning the exhibition. And we were really lucky actually that we had the Mind the Gap team, because they work with people with a lot of different disabilities, and they were really supportive of working with someone who's had a stroke. We'd say in terms of planning something like this, it's a lot to think about, but it was worth it. We've learned about what's possible with the comms team here and the knowledge mobilisation team. It's been amazing. I've said this when I've presented similar before, like the team here are brilliant. So I've been bigging them up to everyone in our department as well. We were very much open to learning. So we had the evaluation forms at the space, and we've got feedback from those now. I'll show you a slide. And it's been a way of connecting people after stroke. It's just been brilliant in that way of bringing people together. So this is just a pile of forms, and obviously you can't read them all there, but yeah, it's just someone saying what a way to show a struggle with words through art. It says 1,000 words, amazing way to reach people about research effectively. So we had some really lovely feedback like that. And then we had some really good constructive feedback in terms of like, why don't you do a virtual version, which we are definitely considering, maybe like a book or some way of presenting it also. Again, these are all things that we want to take forward. So it was really helpful to have that feedback. And some people dropped their contact details in the box as well, which was great. So moving forward, the final report went in mid-September, so I've done that. We've got the papers to publish that are ongoing. We thought about making some blogs just to reflect on the process, because it's been great having things published like in little newsletters, but just to round it off, we want to do a virtual version of the exhibition, and Mark's keen for that, and we think that would be good for reaching people who couldn't physically get there, and especially stroke survivors around the country that they weren't near enough to be in Bradford. We had a poster at the recent conference in Bradford, so the Society for Social Medicine and Population Health conference, that was a few weeks ago. We've got a poster presentation at the UK Stroke Forum in Aberdeen in November this year, and I've applied for the Patient and Public Engagement Award at that conference, so waiting feedback, but fingers crossed it'd be nice to get an award for this. And we've got plans for taking the findings forward, future grants, and to, of course, stay in touch with the knowledge mobilisation team that have been brilliant here. So thank you all for listening.